You want to triple that number. I think there were more than 1,200 total participants in the state last year in more than 400 different sites.
Okay. I'm just curious because when I did have AmeriCorps members at Preble Street, it was like 10, 15 years ago. And one was a project through New York, through Joelberg, which was an anti-hunger corps. And then we also had AmeriCorps through Goodwill. And so both times the members had like a cohort that they participated in for like training and camaraderie. So I'm just trying to get like an understanding of the makeup of what you these applications and what connections the AmeriCorps members would have to other AmeriCorps members.
Okay, I got you. Well,
Well, yeah, go ahead, Jamie. I just want to also point out that we had an info session earlier today, and there will be a recording for programs that are interested in a smaller footprint. So this grant competition, which Jamie will get to, is for programs who want 8 full-time equivalents and up. And the other RFP that's open
Mm.
simultaneously is for programs that want between 2 and 5 full-time equivalents.
Well, sounds like I'm in the wrong one then.
No, I mean, most of the design stuff is pretty much the same, the big picture. The limitations have to do with um, the members have to serve at a single site rather than be dispersed around multiple sites. In other words, they have to all be supervised in the same place for the smaller programs. And then there's the limitation on the numbers. But I can follow up with you, Michelle, to unpack that a little bit more if you needed information about that.
Yeah, that's super, super helpful. Thank you.
so to answer the question about connectivity and camaraderie, the esprit de corps of AmeriCorps, each year we help facilitate the members developing their own conference. It's AmeriCorps it's a member conference. It's for AmeriCorps members, by AmeriCorps members, and that encompasses every state and national. So anyone serving in Maine is obviously more than welcome to and encouraged to come to the the event. There's also the Maine Volunteer Leadership Conference, which I believe is being held in August this year, which AmeriCorps members are also encouraged to come to. Um, but we do try to keep a line on those that are national participants serving in Maine so that they don't feel isolated. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes,
Can
thank you.
can you talk a little bit about, because we have tried to hire AmeriCorps workers and we just weren't able to because we couldn't get anyone who could afford to live in Portland. This was a couple of years back. I'm just wondering if you can comment on that at all. Has that been an issue? We haven't tried in a couple of years.
Housing is always an issue. Sometimes programs can do get subsidized housing for members, which works if they know someone and a landlord's willing to kind of cut a deal for them because they know the program or what have you. But there's no general pipeline of
Hmm.
an underground situation of a pipeline for AmeriCorps housing. Although on the alumni network, we do try to put a call out there if there's AmeriCorps members serving throughout the state. If there's anyone willing to host an AmeriCorps member, like perhaps another alumni. Um, but I don't know how completely successful that is. I think, yeah, it is a challenge.
Victoria, I'll also add that depending on who you hosted AmeriCorps members from, the living allowance can vary significantly. So there's a minimum living allowance, and that's been increased in the last couple of years pretty significantly at the federal level. But our grants have a higher minimum living allowance than the federal minimum. So our members' living allowances are tied to Maine's minimum wage. And so we typically track about a year behind because the minimum wage is, updated in January. Then we would have a competition like this and the grant wouldn't start until much later in the year. And with previous year's funding, it's tied to the previous year's minimum wage, but it's a few $1,000s higher than what is the minimum federal requirement. And then the maximum amount is close to 35,000 if you can provide additional local funds to support that. So members aren't limited to the minimum living allowance. It depends on whether the program wants to increase the living allowance above and beyond that minimum.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. And so the requirements of the program is that um, if we were awarded the grant, then we would be funded for that minimum amount per AmeriCorps volunteer, and then we would
Jamie's
pay.
just about to cover how this all works.
Oh yeah, okay. And then we would pay health insurance, is my understanding.
Well, that's let Jamie finish running through her slides,
Yeah,
and
we will.
we'll circle back to that.
Yeah,
Because
we'll go over that. If it doesn't get answered quite the way you need it to be, just ask and chime in. But we do go into that. So, sorry. For this competition, the program may only operate in Maine. This needs to be, hold on. Okay, sorry, I was on the wrong slide. I apologize, everybody. Eligible entities for this RFA must have an EIN. They can be public agencies, municipal and county governments or state, private nonprofit agencies, school districts and higher education institutions, and faith-based organizations. And the Maine AmeriCorps program must have at least one employee that will devote 100% of the time to the AmeriCorps program. They must be physically present in the community. And the grant is for 3 years, and the earliest start would be September 1st of 2025. And so the goal of all those service activities, you are measurably improving hold on. Sorry about that, everyone. So service targets need or problem in the community, and the goal is you're measurably improving the situation for the targeted population in your service area. The service activity needs to be evidence-based. There needs to be some research or evaluation done on that activity that proves that it works. The model is maybe promoted by an expert on the topic and that you're implementing, and make sure you're implementing with fidelity, meaning that you're not drastically changing the model. Community consultation is key so that those who will benefit from the program help design it in some way, and the community is providing make sure the community is providing advice and guidance during the implementation. So, so when do you know is an organization ready? Leadership supports the goals, methods, and engaging AmeriCorps members. Other employees support and welcome AmeriCorps members and volunteers, and local resources are real, not just hoped for. You need to be able to track effectiveness with data and performance measures, and you can pick from a national menu of paired outputs and outcomes, and they'll provide the instructions for measuring. And what we are looking for at these service activities so we're looking for 3 aspects of impact in the service activities, or how things improve, trees get planted, community capacity means local volunteer growth, means 5 volunteers were recruited to help with the tree planting. Member development, what members learn. Members took a dendrology course, and they learned about tree identification that way, which helps them in their member development. So You need to be able to thoroughly outline the program in a logic model, or you get to do this. There's an opportunity for that. So you're going to describe the need, the community readiness to address that need, and you've done a complete inventory of all the resources needed to implement the program. You're including details like location sites where members will conduct service activities, the core activities, the context for service, the number of AmeriCorps members needed, their qualifications, whether or not you want them to have a college degree, and they need a training plan. You also need agency staffing and internal partners to implement a successful program. So outlined here is the basic visual. There's the need, the prevalence, severity, geography. You want local data, not national data. There's the intervention, what the members will do, how long, the intensity, the beneficiaries, and the results are the outputs and the outcomes, which are the outcomes are the change in attitude, behavior, or condition. You'll need evidence the proposed activity is effective. You'll need, I've already kind of stated this, that evaluation and research into this need show that the activity will improve the situation. You'll need credentials or industry experts that promote a solution and evidence the community is ready to tackle the issues and agrees on the solution, and understands and describes the intersection of AmeriCorps program and other community efforts. So what does an AmeriCorps grant provide? It provides the personnel, it provides AmeriCorps member slots. There's 3 options under this grant: 1,700 hour members, 1,200 hour, and 900 hour. And you can see 1,700 hours is equivalent to 11 months. 1,200 hours is equivalent to 9 months, and 900 hours is equivalent basically to 6 months of time.
Jamie, I think this slide is incorrect. I think it's been swapped with the rural program. The AmeriCorps standard grants include the full range of all service slot types.
Okay, so scratch what I just said and add in.
So I apologize about that. The slide in the other program actually, I remember, had all of the slots. So I think there was a switching of the two. So apologize, folks, for that. But you have more options than what's on this slide.
They are in the RFA, I know. That is for sure. There's a list.
There are more part-time positions than are listed on the slide. And they don't have to be done in full-time service. So, for example, the shortest slot type is 300 hours. And that could be done in 9 weeks as, say, a summer program. Or if you served every Saturday for 6 hours, you would get to 300 hours over the 50 weeks in the year, with a couple of weekends for break. And so as part of your consideration in planning is what's the distribution of effort that best meets your needs. And there's lots of options in this case. They can be combination of full-time year-round folks, part-time folks, and some who are serving in full-time capacity receive a living allowance, and some who perhaps do not necessarily have to receive a living allowance. So sorry to add that confusion.
No, thank you for the clarification, Michael. And full-time means 35 plus hours a week. AmeriCorps provides funds to support the members. The federal agency sets a maximum per member amount, and that's known as the cost per member. It's based off of 1,700 hours, and this year the cost per member is $27,000. So for those of you that have hosted this, just gives you a little bit of the host site versus grantee. As a grantee, no cost share is paid to another agency. You budget to fit your own circumstances, and the resources you put towards the program count as local share for your grant and not someone else's. And you have full control over the activity implemented and like the member work plan, assessment of performance and such. And you get full credit for change in the local need. So that's the difference between being a host site versus a grantee. So the total program cost includes the granted amount, operating costs paid from local money, recruitment, travel, training, supervision, employees, admin, supplies. The budget type under this RFA is a fixed cost award. Cost reimbursement is not an option. And fixed awards require local funds, but you don't have to report out expenses. So that's a decrease of the reporting burdens. Under fixed amount awards, the funds distributed are based on enrollment. You only receive funding for positions that are filled. Reimbursement is calculated on hours the members serve each period, which usually people invoice once a month. For the financials, there's no budget detail. There's no expenditure reporting, although there are quarterly reports for income that demonstrates that costs are covered. So for these fixed amount awards, success does hinge on recruitment and retention of members, and the monitoring is focused mainly on performance. So here's a breakdown, a mock budget of living allowance and required expenses. So as you can see, the minimum living allowance stipend is $23,460. The FICA will be paid out, accidental injury and death insurance paid, healthcare coverage for each member is about for 11 months. That's how it's budgeted here, and it's $420 a month here for 11 months. And there will be a need for a background check. So that's around $50. So if you look at it, it's $31,000 and some change, which is more than the $27,000 that's covered. So there's a shortfall. So you'll need to come up that with through local share. So the awarded amount only covers a portion of the total cost for the member support. So like I said, you'll have to come up with the remainder of the cost. Okay, so there's 3 questions. Oh, it's a quiz. So CPM means I can't see anybody, but so CPM means cost per member. I'll answer. And if I can get to the next screen. And all service terms must be served full-time, 35 plus hours a week. But there are several options to fit program design, like Michael was saying. 675, 450, 1,700 hours, 1,200 hours, 300 hours, 900 hours, and this is a quiz, but all of the above are correct. So third question, I'm going to answer myself. Just kidding. All AmeriCorps members serving full-time must receive a living allowance, health insurance, and accident, injury, or worker comp insurance coverage. And yes. So moving on, planning for and managing AmeriCorps members. So here is the list that we were talking about. This is correct. Member service terms have 5 options. Okay, 1,700 through 300 hours.
6 options.
6 options. Why does it say 5?
Because they added the 1,200-hour one at some point.
Oh, okay. Well, gotcha. They tricked me. All right. So 1,700-hour member is basically can be completed in a year. And 1,200 hours, it breaks down the duration of time as 9 months, which is great if you're running your program in a school year. 900 hours, 300 hours, like Michael was saying, 300 hours is usually good for, shorter term programs that run mainly through the spring and summer. Living allowance is only provided if serving 35 plus hours a week. And understanding the member service years is it's like a full-time equivalency. So one MSY, member service year, is equivalent to 1,700 hours. And here's a calculation chart of the AmeriCorps math you'll find in the RFA. So a standard AmeriCorps program, you design a program and need for people first. You'll have to determine staffing levels required and then the slots. Keep the slot types to a minimum because more than 2 types are really challenging to manage. Like if you have them all across the board, 2 of each, it's going to be very challenging. So AmeriCorps members do commit to a term of service. They sign a member agreement that goes over requirements of service, details things like the code of conduct and their benefits. There's also a need for member position descriptions. It's similar to a volunteer role description. It goes over terms of service, the function of the role at the place of service, their qualifications, skills, desired qualifications, skills, knowledge, and abilities. It could be essential or preferred. The position description goes over duties or responsibilities, daily hours and location, and the reporting relationship, what's expected of them. So AmeriCorps members' benefits are for full-time is a living allowance, health coverage, and they even have the option of childcare through a waiver through the federal agency. There's also a benefit of forbearance on payment of student loans. And on successful completion, this is the award, the education award for 1,700-hour member is like 7,000. So that is wrong in this slide. So it's over 7,000. The education award. And member development, what do we mean by that? It's equivalent to professional development of staff. You'll go through, you'll orient the members, train them, and go through the onboarding process, train them on skills, give them knowledge for the tasks at hand, like whether they need to, go through chainsaw safety or, becoming a mandated reporter, things of that nature. Education or training that will improve the understanding of the issue, the agency, the community context. Helping members document performance is a way of professional development, and it strengthens member employment prospects in the future. So how do you get AmeriCorps members? They're recruited, selected, supervised, and evaluated by your agency. They receive training when you have them. They receive training to perform all the service activities at the start as well as during their terms of service. The reflection activities that can be organized by the program which we would hope you would do to develop an ethic of service and civic responsibility. There's an opportunity if a member is over the age of 55 or older, they can transfer the education award to their child or grandchild. Okay, time for another break. So are there any questions? You can put them in the chat or unmute yourself.
Let me talk briefly about the health insurance because that
Yes.
was raised earlier. So there's more than one way to provide health insurance, and Jamie's example on the slide included the full cost of health insurance for that member. On average, in the state of Maine, only half of AmeriCorps members accept or need the health insurance. Um, there, Many members who serve are under the age of 26, or sometimes covered by their parents' insurance, or are already covered by other insurances. So you're only required to purchase health insurance for full-time members who are serving in a full-time capacity, um, and only if they don't already have insurance. So that so if you look at the average and you took that cost profile, you could cut the number, the $5,000, in half, and that brings you much closer to the $27,000 covering the majority of the member costs. So the living stipend, the FICA match, the um, workers' comp insurance, the background check, and a portion of the health insurance. There are other, and so that cost comes from an AmeriCorps specific health insurance program um, that works like an employer program. So the nice thing about it has low administrative burden because you basically enter the AmeriCorps members' names, you sign them up, and then the insurance company sends them a card, takes care of all the interactions, and you let the company know when the member's finishing and the health insurance ends and you're not billed for it. So it's low administrative burden. Um, you can also use other methods to cover members. You can reimburse them for health insurance on the Affordable Care Marketplace, for example. And given that AmeriCorps members make a relatively small amount of money annually, they're typically recipients of subsidies, which can lower the cost significantly on a monthly basis. The challenge with that is it doesn't work like an employer plan, and you need to make sure that members are covered from the beginning of their service to the end of their service. And because you're not buying it for them, you have to chase the members around and make sure that it's been purchased and that they're set up for reimbursement, and those things all occur in a timely way. So if you have 2 or 5 members, it's fairly easy to chase your members around and get health insurance at a lower cost. If you have 100 members, it's much more challenging, and the employer type program is probably, in the end, a cost savings. So you have some choice in how you spend the healthcare dollars. The requirement is that 1,700-hour members who serve full-time receive the benefit of health insurance. And then typically that's extended to shorter terms where members serve in a full-time capacity. So again, more than 35 hours a week. Members that serve only part-time, few hours a week, um, don't need to receive that benefit, but you still get the $27,000 per MSY. So if you have, 5 year-round full-time members, and then you have 10 450 quarter-time members, you're going to get roughly 20, a little bit more than 20 MSYs worth of money, but only the 10 full-time people are going to require the full cost if the 450-hour people are spread out across the year, doing, say, 11 hours a week. And then they wouldn't receive a living allowance, they wouldn't receive health insurance, but you could still draw down the money to support them, the full 27 per MSY. So I just wanted to clarify that the health insurance costs in the estimate slide are sort of a worst case scenario. And I think Victoria had another question.
Yes, I wanted to clarify a point that you said, Jamie. I think that well, two questions. What's the difference between a grantee and a host? I think maybe the grantee is sort of the organization that's working with a collaborative of other so that workers can be in partnering, doing the same work, but in a scattered site model. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
So, yeah, the grantee is the prime organization that could distribute the members to host sites.
And then the grantee would then is required to provide help do all the details and logistics around health insurance and paperwork for the grant, right? Not the host
Yes,
sites, right?
correct.
And then the other question is around the grantee would then have to have a full-time supervisor
Yeah,
for not a part-time, has to be a full-time supervisor to oversee the AmeriCorps workers.
yeah,
So in aggregate, we require a full-time equivalent. So you might have somebody in your finance office who spends 10% of their time, and then you might have a program director who spends 10% of the time, and then somebody else spending 80% of their time doing recruitment and management. So that equals one full-time equivalent. You don't have to, and so, the difference between 8 members, 10 members is isn't a big difference. If you had 50 members, you probably would, want to make sure you had a lot of staff to deal with that human resource load. Think about it in terms of if you were bringing this many new people on to your organization, how much time and effort would it take to make all that happen? And because AmeriCorps members cycle every year, you're in a situation where you're constantly recruiting and you're constantly working on retention. In fixed price grants, your money stops if you don't fill your positions or if someone leaves early. So you want to really make sure that you're filling those positions and that you're keeping people there for the year. To go
Great,
back,
thank you.
yeah, one other quick question or one other thing about the host site. Um, while the funded organization is responsible to make sure that the members have access to all their benefits and receive um, their pay and are covered by insurances, the host site can contribute in a variety of ways to that. So in some programs, the host site pays a fee to the funded agency to cover some of those overhead issues, and that can help fund that staffing. In other situations, service sites do initial recruiting, and then the final enrollment is a shared activity. And then, of course, host sites also typically spend a significant amount of time offering supervision and support outside of the agency itself, if you have remote service sites.
okay. Thank you, Michael. I think that's all the questions, so we'll move on. So we're moving on to how the selection process works. We recruit external peer reviewers for the assessment of the narratives and the budget. And there's 4 options of recommendation. Strongly recommend for further review means it's a comprehensive and thorough proposal. Recommended for further review, it demonstrates overall competence, but it has some weaknesses in it. There's a recommended for further review with hesitation, which means approximately equal strengths and weaknesses, but the weaknesses are not offset by the strengths. And then there's a do not recommend for further review, and it's a proposal with serious shortcomings, so they don't really make it out of the peer review process. What you can expect is there's a selection process what the peer reviewers do. assessments. And then there's a structured interview of your team for the program members who would be involved with the AmeriCorps program. And then there is a technical review by the Commission Grants Task Force. There are preference points applied in the tech review. Preference for this competition are with from partnerships or coalition whose members represent local organizations working together to implement common evidence-based approach to a community problem. It's in the RFA, and preference points are also applied by those proposals submitted by an organization led or primarily supporting or recruiting participants from historically marginalized communities, though that part is kind of on hold at this point. Proposals addressing an issue under one of the funding priorities, and I believe that's on page 16 in your RFA. So what does a successful proposal look like? If you focus on the considerations and priorities that apply to your program idea, if you're clear and succinct, if you explain how you're going to implement the program and provide detail instead of just stating the criteria will be met. One thing to keep in mind is don't make assumptions about the reviewers knowing anything about your organization, your program, the area you serve or intend to serve, the local issues, or your beneficiaries. Do use an impartial proofreader to go over your proposal and follow the instructions and discuss the criterion in the order that they're presented in the instructions, and that will be lead to a successful proposal. And what we're having you do is do a narrative content review. Make sure you review the completed budget and submission and documentation. There's further documentation that's listed in the RFA that is required for you to submit. And that is pretty much the conclusion from the beginning of design to the assessment and review of your proposal. Are there any further questions? If you do have any questions and that weren't answered and you think of later, you can email the attachment A to the service.commission@maine.gov with the subject with the RFA number. It's supposed to be 21st. They need to be, sorry about that. Oh my gosh. All questions must be received by March 21st, and the final applications are due April 8th at 2025. And that is everything. I believe that we've answered questions, but again, if there are more questions, please refer to this email and email them to us. Okay. Well, thank you all for attending. I really appreciate it. Look forward to reading your applications. If there's no further comment or questions, we can end in 6 minutes early. Thank you. I will stop recording now.
All right.
Where's my button to stop recording?
I just stopped it.
You did? Oh, okay, because you're alternative host.
Yep.
Good.
All right. I'm gonna leave the webinar.
Okay. All right. Bye.